Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for Space Shuttle Endeavour's STS-134 L-1 countdown status briefing. Joining me today is Jeff Spaulding, NASA Test Director.
Good morning.
Joe DeLay, STS-134 Payload Manager.
Good morning.
And Kathy Winters, Shuttle Weather Officer.
Good morning.
We'll listen to our panelists and then take questions. Jeff.
Thank you, Candria, and good morning to everyone, and welcome. I'm very happy to be here today to provide status on tomorrow's launch of the Space Shuttle Endeavour on the STS-134 mission to deliver the alpha magnetic spectrometer up to the station. I'm also pleased to report that everything's going well out at Pad A. We don't have any issues right now that we're tracking. We're right back on our timelines. Yesterday we were down a little bit, if you recall, but we have worked really hard overnight to get things caught back up, and we're in really good shape going through the rest of the count today. Also yesterday we were getting ready to get into our fuel cell reactant loading, and that operation is complete, and we did get all of the tanks loaded up to our full capacity as expected, and consequently we do have our 7 days of pad hold time for liquid hydrogen and 12 for liquid oxygen, so that gives us our maximum capability we were looking for out of our fuel cells. Our countdown just entered our T-minus 11-hour hold, and that's a 13-hour, 22-minute built-in hold, and will get us through the remainder of today. We are just finishing also our main engine final preparations and checkout, and those are going as expected, and we're doing a lot of our planned inspections of the external tank and the boosters and the orbiter, and all of those are in work and going well also. Later this afternoon, we do intend to power up our orbiter ground and the orbiter and ground side communications networks, and we'll be doing a full checkout end-to-end on all of those systems at about 1:30 or so. Once we're done with that, we'll go into the crew module and start beginning our flight crew equipment late stow operations, putting all of our final middecks and some of the last provisions into the vehicle as well, and some configurations for the crew. Once that's done, we do have quite a bit of launch pad configuring to do throughout the night to get us to our retraction of the rotating service structure, which is scheduled for 7 o'clock this evening. As we work throughout the night after that, we do have some final pad configurations as well as our final launch loading preps for our propellants, and those will continue throughout the night until we start clearing the pad of non-essentials about 1:30 in the morning, and then we'll work our final preparations in anticipation of loading the external tank at 6:22 tomorrow morning. Once we get done with that operation, it's about 3 hours long or so. The flight crew will be headed out to the pad shortly after noon tomorrow, and then we'll work all our final operations that we need to get us to our launch on time. Our launch time, as we've been briefing, is our window opens at 3:42 tomorrow afternoon. We do target the middle of the window, which correlates to about that 3:47 time frame or so. We'll sync everything up to the second once we get down to our T-minus 9-minute hold, so we'll have all that in place as we get ready to go down through the rest of the count. As far as our launch availability goes, we do have tomorrow, April the 29th, all the way up through and including May the 4th, so we have 6 days of opportunities. We will only get about 4 attempts in those 6 days, just due to the limitations of our ability on our turnarounds. So we'll use the best 4 of those 6 days to get us through the count and before we run into our first constraint. And that constraint, excuse me, is the Atlas launch, which is currently on May the 6th. We do need, for the Atlas folks to be ready, they need the 5th and the 7th also to configure the range. So we have about 3 days blocked out that we cannot use the range. So after the 4th, our first opportunity to come back on the range would be May the 8th. That would give us another opportunity before we run into one of our constraints on the 9th, which is one of our dual docked ops constraints that has to do with the 25S, the Soyuz mission on docking. That's a single-day constraint at this point, and then we would get back and be able to launch from the 10th pretty much clear and free through the 28th of the month of May. After that point, we run into a lot of constraints with the ATV and the 27S Soyuz mission, as well as some beta angle cutouts. So we're going to be down for a couple of weeks after that. But it does give us a lot of opportunity up front before we run into the Atlas, and then a lot of opportunity certainly afterwards to get off the ground. It is a 14-day mission. We do have 2 contingency days, as we've been briefing. We will be looking at those once we get on orbit, probably around day 5 or 6, to see if we're going to use those additional contingency days on orbit to do additional work that we have on this, that we could do while we're up on the station. The end of mission is planned right now for KSC on Friday the 13th, right around 9:30 in the morning on that day. If we do go to a +1 day, the time doesn't change too much. It's around 9:52 or so on Saturday the 14th. So we are very proud of our teams here at KSC and also all around the world that have been working on this shuttle and as well as onto this payload to get us ready for this STS-134 mission. Endeavour, like all of our shuttles, has had a really distinguished history throughout its life. Tomorrow, we're going to add to that distinction as she departs for the mission to deliver the alpha magnetic spectrometer to the station. So, thank you.
Thank you. Joe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. I'm Joseph Delay, the NASA KSC mission manager, and I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking to you guys about the payloads that we're going to be flying on ULF-6. I can honestly say that in the many years that I have been here, which is quite a few years, this is probably one of the most challenging, but yet most exciting payload that I've ever had a chance to work on. I'm not going to go too much into AMS because I know Professor Ting is going to be giving a briefing at 2 o'clock, and I want to steal his thunder. So I'll concentrate on the deck, go a little bit in AMS, and then we'll talk some middecks. Next slide, please. Okay, just a couple general highlights. As Jeff mentioned, it's a 14-day +2 mission, crew of 6. The AMS weighed in a little over 15,000 pounds, and the ELC weighed in almost at 14,000 pounds. Excuse me. AMS will eventually be attached to the S3 truss, and the ELC-3 will be attached to the P3 truss. So flight day 1, they'll go ahead and check out AMS, kind of do a health check in the orbiter. And then flight day 3, which is also the docking day, they'll take the deck and check it out and install it onto P3. And then flight day 4, they'll go ahead and install AMS onto S3. Okay, and this is just a great picture of the, it's a great layout of the various payloads that are going to be in the orbiter. There's 2 other payloads we're flying. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about them. The first one is MISSY, and that's a DoD payload, and it will characterize performance of new prospective spacecraft material and electrons when subject to the space environment. We've been flying those for a few years. And then STORM, that we're going to be taking up, is a prototype system consisting of visual navigation and a docking camera, and it will advance the capability necessary for automated rendezvous and docking. This is a great picture of the Deck 3 that's being that was installed into the canister and eventually taken out to the pad. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the ORUs, orbital replacement units. There's a bunch going up on this mission, so let's talk about them. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have Deck 3, and on top of the deck, there's going to be some ORUs, and of course on the bottom of the deck, there's going to be ORUs. As I mentioned earlier, this will be attached to station, and they're what I call future spares, orbital replacement units. If we need it, we got them. We'll have the capability to use them. Okay, let's go through those a little bit. Next page. Okay, so the first ORU we're bringing up is the ammonia tank, the ATA. And there's actually 2 tanks, and each tank contains about 300 pounds of ammonia, and that's used as part of the ISS external thermal control system. And another ORU we're bringing up is called the HPGT, or the high pressure gas tank. And that contains about 15 cubic feet of oxygen that will be used to supply the International Space Station. Okay, excuse me, another payload or ORU that we're bringing up on the deck is STPH-3, and that basically stands for Space Test Program Houston. And that's a DoD experiment, and it's a complement of 4 individual experiments that will advance thermal protection, various pumps, digital camera, and approaching spacecraft in low Earth orbit for long duration. Okay, and this is a great picture of, we're bringing up 2 SASs, which is the S-band antenna subassembly and that's used primarily for local communications between the orbiter and, of course, potential future vehicles and ISS. Okay, this is a picture of the special purpose detector manipulator, which is a highly intricate component on the International Space Station mobile servicing station. And what we're doing on this mission, we're actually sending up a spare arm that's going to be part of the SPDM. Okay, this picture, the CTC, the Cargo Transportation Carrier, we're going to be flying up 10 what we call RPCMs, or remote power control modules, and one ORU attachment kit. The RPCMs are like big circuit breakers for electronics in space. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about AMS. As I mentioned earlier, later today, I think around 2 o'clock, Professor Ting will be giving a briefing on AMS. But I do want to say that it's been an honor and a privilege to work with Professor Ting and his team. Here we have 16 countries, some of the smartest physicists in the world, all coming together to design and build a particle detector to search for antimatter and matter and dark matter in space. I think the most exciting objective of AMS is to probe the unknown. If we were to probe the known, that's not exciting. We're going to go probe the unknown. That's exciting. And we're going to search for phenomena which exists in nature that has not yet imagined, nor do we have the tools to discover. So if somebody was telling me what does AMS do, well, I can tell you what I think AMS is going to do, but we don't know what it's going to do, and that's a good thing. That's how you advance science. So our jobs at KSC was to work with Professor Ting and his team and complete the integration and testing of AMS. And as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, I can honestly say it's probably one of the most challenging, yet memorable payloads or experiments that I've worked on in many years. Okay, here's a picture of AMS being delivered from CERN, Switzerland to KSC back in August 2010. And the picture of AMS, a beautiful picture of AMS in our processing facility as we're testing it and doing some final integration work. And of course, AMS is being lifted into the canister and of course eventually brought out to the pad. And then here's what AMS will look like once it's on station. Okay. So now we talked about the payloads and the experiments. Let's just spend a few minutes talking about our middecks. There's a total of 10 middecks that are going up on this mission. I think 8 are non-passive and 2 are passive, 2 have power applied to them. The non-passives, I think we'll start installing those around 11 this morning, and the powers units we'll start installing early afternoon after lunch. But let me just spend a couple minutes talking about some of the different middecks. So on the left, we have Glacier, which is the General Laboratory Active Cryogenic ISS Experiment Refrigeration. And this is designed to provide transportation and the preservation capability for sampling that requires thermal control, different types of samples that require thermal control. On the right is what we call ASI, Biocon in space, and that's sponsored by our Italian friends. And they're going to investigate areas of cellular biology and plant growth. Okay, this picture is called the CGBA, the Commercial Generic Bioprocessing Apparatus. And we've flown this before, and this provides the K through 12 community with opportunities to utilize the unique microgravity environment that's on ISS as part of their studies or as part of the classroom studies. In this particular experiment, the kids will be looking at spiders. So that's pretty cool. All right, next we have the Cube Lab, CUBE, and this provides another low-cost, fantastic educational platform on ISS. In this picture, we have 6 seed wells inside a plant growth chamber. Okay, on the left is what we call the immune payload or the integrated immune payload, and this monitors the crew members' immune functions to assess any adverse effects on spaceflight on the human system. And on the right is called In Space, which is the investigating the structure of paramagnetic aggregates from colloidal emulsions. So what that means is it's going to study the behavior of fluids under the influence of various magnetic fields. And this should help lead to improvements or potential development of like new brake systems for various vehicles. Okay, and last but not least, we got a couple pictures of various biology and National Lab Pathfinder experiments. On the top right is a picture of the NPL vaccine, which is a commercial payload which will help lead to the potential development of vaccines of infections we have here on Earth, and that has flown before. So, in summary, we got 2 great payloads going up. We got 4 great payloads going up, and lots of good middecks. And this is a very exciting mission for us all, and I'm just glad to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Well, weather is expected to get a little bit bad this evening. We do have good weather today through the day. It's a little bit hot, a little bit windy, but overall no significant hazards. As we get into the late afternoon and into the evening hours, we are expecting the front that's been working its way through the southeast U.S. the last couple of days, causing all that severe weather. We're expecting that to move down into central Florida. Now, it won't have its energy like it's had up and won't be producing the severe weather as widespread as it has been doing the last couple of days, but we do expect that there could be an isolated severe thunderstorm along the front or as we get the convergence along the coast this evening. So what we're expecting is as the front comes down, we're expecting some inland thunderstorms may already be making their way over to us, some isolated storms after about 4 p.m., but then as we get into the evening hours, we could get some more widespread activity coming in from the northwest. So the weather for this evening is a concern due to the RSS retract operations. The front should move through in the overnight hours, but the weather will probably be done somewhere around 10 or 11 p.m., and so that's not probably going to cause too much of a delay, and we'll still be able to get to tanking by tomorrow morning. So as we get into tanking, we expect the conditions to be cloudy, and then as we go into launch time, we expect the clouds to gradually scatter out by launch time. But we are a little bit more concerned as sealing could linger in the area, so we did increase the probability of KSC weather prohibiting launch from 20% that we had yesterday to 30% due to the fact that the front is a little bit slower on the meteorological models, and we wanted to make sure we're capturing the concern for a low cloud ceiling as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow we are red during the countdown for a ceiling, and then we expect the conditions to improve by launch time. So again, a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. Let me go ahead and show you the satellite picture. When you look at the satellite picture, you can see that front that's been causing the severe weather in the southeast. Been very bad, obviously, a lot of tornado reports and hail reports and severe weather yesterday. And that is going to be moving into Florida, but it's really the tail end of the front, and it's not going to be as strong as what it's been in the southeast. But as it does come down into Florida, it is going to cause us some weather this evening, some cloudy conditions in the morning, maybe even some showers in the area at tanking time. That's not a constraint for tanking, though, and then clearing up by launch time. So going into the tanking forecast, the weather is expected to be cloudy during that time. Visibility should be unrestricted. I can't rule out a stray shower still being in the area, but overall the weather should be starting to improve by this time. I did increase the number for the probability of KSC weather prohibiting tanking just a bit from 5% to 10% just because the front is a bit slower. And so with that, there's a slightly greater risk of lightning within 5 if that trend happens to continue. But right now, we're expecting overall just to be cloudy with maybe some isolated showers in the area, but overall no significant chance for a violation for tanking. As we go into our launch forecast, you can see we're still expecting scattered skies in the low levels, just some clouds around 3,000 feet. Visibility unrestricted. Winds are expected to be from the northeast, 12 gusts to 18 knots. So our big concern there is the crosswind, but the crosswind is one of those things where if it exceeds 15 knots, which right now at the SLF it's forecast to be 16 knot cross, then the aircraft can give us some help by doing the dives and seeing if the performance is still okay. A lot of times we can get up to 17 knots on the crosswind and still be okay. So overall right now the main concerns are crosswinds and ceilings lingering in the area. With that we have a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. For For the SRB recovery forecast, the weather should be clearing out there pretty quickly tomorrow morning, and so winds are going to be mainly from the north, from 12 to 18 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet. It might be a little choppy in the morning. Things will start smoothing out over the next few days, though, so overall no concerns for SRB recovery. Spaceflight Meteorology Group is forecasting some pretty significant wind at the abort landing sites out west. For Edwards Air Force Base, we have peak winds gusting up to 35 knots, and also for Northrop Field up to 36 knots. And so for Edwards, that's a head and tailwind constraint violation, and for Northrop, that's a crosswind of 32 knots, so violations at both those locations. And Spaceflight Meteorology Group is forecasting good weather at Istris. Again, still concerned for showers in the area, both at Marone and Zaragoza, due to a trough that's located over the area. Now, if we happen to delay 24 hours, the weather improves when it comes to the clouds and those conditions. Everything really clears out pretty nicely. We're just expecting a few clouds at 3,000 feet, but we have more of a crosswind concern due to the fact that the winds come around more easterly. So with that, the crosswinds are more of a concern, the clouds are less of a concern, still a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. For the abort landing sites in the U.S., still looking at some windy conditions, although Edwards does come back into a go condition with a headwind of 16 knots, still, though, a significant crosswind at Northrop Field of 26 knots. And for the TAL sites, Spaceflight Meteorology Group is still concerned about Zaragoza and Marone, both areas having either showers or thunderstorms forecast to be in the area, but again, Istris is looking good. And if we happen to delay 48 hours, the weather improves a bit more with the winds coming more up the runway. So with that, a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch due to mainly more concerns for just some cumulus clouds, but overall pretty good weather on Sunday. And again, for the abort landing sites, this day, the weather looks great for both Edwards and for Northrop Field. And Spaceflight Meteorology Group still forecasting showers and around the area of Zaragoza and thunderstorms in Marone, but again, Istris still a good TAL site all 3 days. So overall, our primary concerns for launch are sealing in the area or a crosswind concern. With that, we have a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch, and we do have one good TAL site forecast, Istris. That concludes my briefing.
Thank you. We'll now take questions. When the microphone comes your way, please state your name, your affiliation, and to whom you're addressing your question. We'll start over here with Mark.
Hi, Mark Kirkman, Interspace News. This is for Jeff. These Queen Countdowns have a habit of having some last-minute drama like we had on the last launch, and I just was wondering if you can clarify a little bit. Mike said you guys went back and talked to the range yesterday, but between that and stuff I've seen in some of your internal messages, has anything changed in how you'll manipulate that kill switch, or procedurally anything changed in the LCC and how you would deal with a situation like that?
Probably the most significant change, let me just start with saying we did a lot to just enhance our communications between the two groups so we understand what each other is going to be doing during those periods late in the count, so that there was no confusion at all. And then secondly, what we did was we went through and talked about once we get into a hold, for example, we can go ahead and remove the hold that's there as a result of that switch, because it's almost like we have two holds at that point, because we also have an internal hold associated with our ground launch sequencer. So we didn't need the secondary hold there. We still want to manage the constraint. Once the constraint's removed, then we don't have to go through two wickets, essentially, to have the range remove their hold switch and have our ground launch sequencer remove their hold. So that was one of the things we cleaned up. So once we actually get into a hold where we're holding for a range constraint, we would have them take that position of the switch into the proceed position, if you will. And then at that point, then we manage the constraint as we would normally. And once that constraint's been lifted, then we'll be able to pick up the clock a little bit more cleanly than we did last time. That was probably the biggest thing that we did out of all of those changes, aside from enhancing the communications between the groups.
Okay. Ken.
Hi, Ken Kramer for Space Flight Magazine. For Jeff and Kathy, we had some real excitement yesterday with the fire. I wonder if you could tell us if that fire happened during the launch day, how that would have affected the launch. Would you have scrubbed it? Also, did the fire go over, smoke go over the pad, and what would have been the effect on an RTLS aboard? Thank you.
I'll start with the first part, and then I'll let Kathy talk what some of our constraints are that we have from the smoke perspective. But yes, of course, we did have the fire kick up a little bit. and I haven't seen anything new. I think it was presumed that it was caused from lightning from the day previous, and had been smoldering. And then, of course, with the winds that we've had, it kind of kicked up that into a brush fire and burned pretty good yesterday. We did kind of get that under control with the Fish and Wildlife folks and have it pretty well under control as we speak. But there are still some winds and it's smoldering a little bit, so we're going to watch that and continue to do so. Most of the smoke did not go over the pad. It went in between this area out here and the pad itself, so most of it did not. The amount of smoke that we were seeing was really not a concern from the pad perspective, because all of the air intakes that we have out there are well filtered and able to handle, a large amount of particulate. So we didn't have any real concerns from that perspective. We also monitor the amount of particulate that's coming in. So none of that was really a concern to us at that point. Most of the concern when we have smoke in the area, and we've had that at other times, is from a landing perspective and visibilities and those types of things. I don't know if you want to talk to that, Kathy.
Well, yes, there's an RTLS constraint of 4 miles for visibility. So if for some reason the smoke brought the visibility down to 4 miles, that'd be the RTLS constraint. And also for a launch constraint, the visibility restriction is 5 miles. It's a range safety constraint. We also have a smoke plume rule. If there was an active fire and a cumulus cloud developed over that fire and caused the cumulus cloud, the fire itself, then we cannot launch through that cloud. So if that cloud migrated over the launch pad and had not been at least 60 minutes since it detached from the smoke plume, then we would have to be read for the smoke plume lightning launch commit criteria, and that's to prevent triggering a lightning strike.
Clara.
Clara Moskowitz with Space.com, and one for Jeff and one for Joe. For Jeff, I'm wondering if you have an updated estimate for the crowd levels expected on the Space Coast tomorrow. We heard that it might be even more than what we were hearing yesterday, and just what kind of challenges that's going to present for you and your team.
I don't honestly know what was briefed yesterday, so I apologize to that. But on center, we're expecting somewhere probably 45,000 or so, I think, and maybe upwards of 700,000 in the county. And I think those are still probably pretty good numbers. We're going into a weekend. We do expect a lot of folks to be coming and visiting us for this launch. It is a historic launch, as we all know. And so we're really pleased with the attention that we're getting from the local communities and all the folks that have come down to visit and are coming over to watch the launch. It presents a little bit of trouble, not so much for the folks coming in to do the launch itself, probably more so if we run into a scrub scenario, and I think we probably talked about that quite a bit. We've worked on a lot of different means by which to try to help the traffic in the area. The local law enforcement has been working extremely hard to try to help move traffic along more quickly in the local areas and to help everybody get out and about onto the roadways and get out as quickly as they can. We do expect some delays. We're trying to manage those internally through the way we're shifting some of our crews and the way in which we're managing some of the things that we have on launch day. But for the most part, it really is of no impact to the prime launch team that's in the firing room. And they'll be there to support and able to support without any real issue. We kind of get sequestered in the firing room once we're here, and a lot of that stuff that's going on externally, we don't tend to notice as much as probably the rest of the folks do.
Third row, please.
Mark Ratterman with Talking Space. A couple questions for Joe Delay. On AMS, on the payload, I know that part of the structure, as well as the instrument itself, is designed to handle launch vibrations. Anything about the structure that you could tell me about as to how it's going to protect the instrument itself? And a second question regarding temperatures inside the instrument, kind of what's the environment in the instrument after the heaters are on? What's the temperature range that it's happy with?
Okay, so for the first question, the structure itself with the magnet is AMS. Okay, so besides, of course, you have MLI or what the white blankets on the outside of that. So besides the main structure protecting AMS, it is part of AMS because you've also got detectors and electronic boxes attached to it. So beside it kind of being a cradle or a structure for AMS, it's also part of AMS. And then for the second question, the AMS, of course, is going to be working in a space environment, which goes from cold to hot every X amount of minutes. So again, it's able to take that for numerous years, so there shouldn't be any issues there either. Thank you.
Okay. Irene, please.
Irene Klotz with Reuters for either Jeff or Kathy. I don't recall if the abort landing sites in Northrop and Edwards are not available. Is that a constraint to launch?
We still have KSC available as an abort once around, as well as our RTLS site. So from that perspective, we're still good.
And also the concern with low clouds for launch, is that for RTLS or is that for range safety, or is that for both?
It's for both. For RTLS, the constraint's 5,000 feet. For range safety, we have a 6,000 foot constraint for unlimited thickness. We can go down to 4,000 feet if it's 500 feet thick or less, and the forward observers have good visibility on the vehicle.
Bill.
Bill Horowitz, CBS. One for Kathy and one for Jeff. Is there a better chance tonight with the front slowing a little bit that RSS could be delayed? And for Jeff, how long can you go before you absolutely have to have that thing back to hit the opening of your fueling window?
It could be a little bit better chance for a delay, but not by a lot, I don't think. A lot of the weather is associated with both the front coming down and also the afternoon weather. That'll be all converging back towards the East Coast. So I don't think it'll be much more, but it may be more till about midnight or so. 11 to midnight is the time period we're thinking. Whereas yesterday we were thinking more 9 to 10 p.m. So maybe just a little bit more with the delay of the front.
And with that too, it looks like the weather is going to cooperate to the point where we're going to be able to do the rotation of the RSS and not have to hold it because of weather, unless we get into a situation where we got phase 2 lightning or some significant winds that we got to deal with. I don't think there's any concern at this point for anything that would delay us, unless some of those things stall right over us and we got to hold off. But we'll evaluate that as we always do. If we were to delay, obviously, we could delay a few hours, 2, 3, 4 hours potentially, depending on how the other work is going and what other things are going on. There are some challenges, though, as to being able to hit the opening of the window once you start delaying past about 2 or 3 hours, or as far as, the opening of the ability to tank on time. So you do run into a significant amount of problem, and now you're working a lot of things in parallel that normally don't happen in parallel, and that becomes a bit of a challenge. But we've done things like that in the past and had issues and delays and been creative in how we manage it. As long as we know in advance what we're doing, we can sometimes pull some things in.
Okay, Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Jeff. One day out, do you feel the excitement building on your team and around you, even in wherever you live? It seems like this is just really taking hold of this whole area because of the president and the Congresswoman. And has there been a decision yet on where the president and his family will view the launch from?
First of all, the first question, I think there is a lot of excitement. I mean, I've been getting a lot of people talking to me about it in a lot of different places when I see folks out or and about, and not just over the last couple of days, but even for the last few weeks. I think that certainly the folks locally recognize the historic nature of the last flight of Endeavour, as well as the second to the last shuttle flight. And for that reason, it's very important to them and to all of us that live and work in this community. And then likewise, the attention that it's getting from all of the people, really around the world, and certainly a lot of folks here in the United States which are coming to visit us and be part of this incredible crowd, is very exciting. I think a lot of people are talking about it quite a bit and are really excited about all the things that are going to be happening and the fact that there are going to be so many people. It seems like we hear a lot of folks talking about how bad the traffic is going to be, but I don't really hear those kind of comments coming from the team themselves about the concerns with dealing with the traffic, because kind of the ends justify the means, and people are just happy to be part of this event, and I think they're really excited about that.
Any update on where the president will be viewing?
There's still some discussion about some of those things. The final determination, I don't have exactly where he's going to be. They're looking at a number of different locations still. And as is always the case, the plans may be changed very late, and we will be ready to accommodate wherever that location is, and certainly we'll be happy to have him here.
Okay. James?
James Dean from Florida Today. A couple questions for Jeff. First, this is the second consecutive countdown unfolding when another vehicle is docking up at the space station at the same time. Just wondering how much extra sort of drama, perhaps uncertainty, that adds to the process that you're going through during the countdown?
There is certainly there's probably a lot more drama to the folks that are doing the docking procedure and doing all those other things. Our team is really focused in on what it is that we're doing here and those types of things. They're well aware that the docking of the Progress is going to take place probably around an hour or so after we get done with our tanking operation. But that certainly isn't the thing that's first and foremost on their mind. The tanking of the vehicle and getting it ready for the flight crew to come out later in the day, that's what our folks are going to be focusing on. We'll be happy to get that clear so that we can continue the rest of the countdown. But I don't think that's anything that's going to be on folks' mind too much that they're going to worry about as we're working through the day.
And just, for the president and many others who may be coming to see the launch for the first time, if you had to give them a little sneak preview, what do they have to look forward to?
Well, I think all of our launches are exciting, and certainly this one's getting a lot more visibility. But for me, I get to stay in the firing room, and believe me, that's extremely exciting, being part of the team, and when you feel the vibration coming and the windows shake and all those different things, and when it goes off the pad, that certainly makes all the hard work and all the years of preparation that a lot of folks have had to do all worth it. But I think you feel it even more when you're outside. And that's really the place for a lot of folks. I think for the first time they've come to see a shuttle launch, when you're outside and you can feel those shock waves coming and see as it's climbing up through the sky. I mean, that's really what it's all about, when you not only get to see it, but you get to feel it and hear the rumble shaking the ground. I mean, that's the most exciting thing you feel, and it is really awe-inspiring. I think it is for a lot of folks that come. I know yesterday they used the term a life-changing moment, and sometimes it can be for folks. It's amazing. A lot of people remember their first shuttle launch when they came to watch that, and believe me, I do.
Robert.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com with a question for Jeff and a question for Joe. First, Jeff, I know you said that the logistics of how many people are coming into the area doesn't really play within the launch, within the LCC, but in terms of tanking decisions and even a scrub decision as you got closer to launch, given that there is a chance that you would have to go to a 48-hour turnaround because of traffic, how do you balance weighing weather, which right now it seems to be trending well, but if it were to get worse, balancing a weather decision versus a 48-hour turnaround as a team?
Well, when we do our turnarounds, we look at a lot of stuff, as you know. The first thing we're going to look at is our technical ability to launch at the next available opportunity. Because if we didn't launch, there's a reason that we didn't launch. If it's just weather, then we'll evaluate what the weather is at that point. But if there's a technical reason that prevented us from launching, we need to manage that, understand what the implications are and how to get through all that. And then we also need to look at if there's some delay in a number of days or whatever, how we get to that point and can we still support it. The next thing we also look at is the weather and our ability to be able to tank and then launch again on the subsequent day that we would have available to us. And those are the most important criteria we have. There's some other criteria now that we're looking at as well, which is the ability to get our crew rest and get folks home in some reasonable amount of time. We have put a lot of mitigations in place. Traffic's still going to be bad and going to be difficult. They will look at that as we get really close to launch. There'll be a much greater propensity to probably want to go to a 48-hour scrub turnaround, but we will not be making that decision until we get into launch day. The further back you are from T0, the less impact, of course, the traffic will have on the team that's here, because the traffic will have cleared before most of those folks even get off console. So there's less concern if you scrub before tanking or during tanking or even after tanking with those folks and their ability to get home in a reasonable amount of time and get the crew rest that they need before they get back. So all of those factors come into play, as well as probably some other intangibles that I haven't even mentioned. So.
And for Joe, given that this is the second to last shuttle mission, can you characterize how packed Endeavour is in terms of mass, specifically with regards to the middeck? Realizing payload in the payload bay is judged a little bit different, but how much of an urge was there to use every available space and pound available?
Yeah, good question. I mean, if you just take a look at the middecks that the payload group is doing, which I call utilization or research, there's 10 of them. 8 non-powered, 2 powered. That's quite a bit. And just looking and reviewing the map of all the space that was available, they used every inch that was available I mean, they really maximized what they could to bring supplies up there, knowing that this is the second to last launch. We want to take advantage and get as much as we can up there between these two launches. So a lot of work and a lot of effort went into maximizing the weight and the trade-off scenarios to get items up there. A good question.
We have time for one final question.
I'm Alan Boyle with MSNBC. I wanted to ask Jeff, how long has it been since there's been a launch that has gone off on time? And is there any effect that the idea of having the president and the congresswoman and all these VIPs here, does that have an effect on the launch team? Do you have to explain to folks and emphasize that this is just another launch and that it's no different, or is it different for the launch team because of that?
And I think I would have to defer as to when when we went on the first attempt and on time. I just don't recall off the top of my head which particular one that was, because our launches have been spaced out a little bit over the last couple of years. As far as the launch team goes, we don't make any different determinations as to the way we manage any of our requirements or the work in which we're going to do, or try harder, if you will, because we have folks here. We do the exact same level of effort. We have excellent procedures and requirements that have been built over 30 years, and they have served us well through that time, and they will continue to do so for these last two launches.
Okay. That will conclude today's Countdown Status Briefing. Please join us live on NASA television at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for the Commercial Crew Development Round 2 briefing. For more information on the STS-134 mission and crew, please visit www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thank you.